Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
The unexpected match. Jack Montgomery stepped out of the sleek, glass-fronted office building, briefcase in hand and a spring in his step. At 26, he was one of the youngest MBA graduates to secure a position at Pinnacle Enterprises, a Fortune 500 company known for its cutthroat corporate culture. As he loosened his tie and breathed in the crisp autumn air, he spotted a familiar face across the parking lot. "Lindsay!" he called out, waving to the tall blonde woman who was fumbling with her car keys. "Having trouble?" Lindsay Williams looked up, her frustration melting into a warm smile. "Oh, hi, Jack. Yeah, just another day of technology conspiring against me?" She laughed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Jack jogged over, his polished Oxfords clicking against the asphalt. "Let me take a look," he offered, extending his hand for the keys. As their fingers brushed, he felt a spark of electricity that had nothing to do with static. "Thanks," Lindsay said, handing over the stubborn fob. "I swear, sometimes I think I'd be better off with a horse and carriage." Jack chuckled, pressing the buttons in various combinations until he heard the satisfying click of the car unlocking. "There you go, your chariot awaits," he said with a theatrical bow. "My hero," Lindsay replied, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "How can I ever repay you?" Jack glanced at his watch, then back at Lindsay's grateful face. He'd been meaning to ask her out for coffee for weeks now, but the timing never seemed right. Taking a deep breath, he decided to seize the moment. "Well, I was just heading home. If you live nearby, maybe I could give you a lift," he suggested, trying to keep his tone casual. "That way, if your car decides to revolt again, you'll have backup." Lindsay's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with genuine appreciation. "That's so sweet of you, Jack. I actually live just a few blocks from here on Maple Grove. Are you sure it's not out of your way?" Jack's heart leaped. Maple Grove was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, known for its sprawling estates and old money residents. "Not at all," he assured her, gesturing towards his car. "Shall we?" As they approached Jack's vehicle, Lindsay let out a low whistle. "Is that a Porsche 911 GT3? She asked, running her hand along the sleek silver body. Jack couldn't hide his pleased grin. The car had been a graduation gift to himself, a symbol of his hard work and ambition. "Good eye," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "You know your cars." "My brother Brian is a bit of a gearhead," Lindsay explained as she slid into the buttery leather seat. "He's always dragging me to auto shows and racing events." As Jack settled into the driver's seat and started the engine, the car purred to life. He couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence as he maneuvered out of the parking lot, stealing glances at Lindsay's profile. "So, Lindsay," he began, navigating through the evening traffic, "we've been working together for 3 months now? And I realized I hardly know anything about you beyond your stellar PowerPoint skills." Lindsay laughed, a melodious sound that filled the car. "Well, what would you like to know? I'm an open book, mostly." "Let's start with the basics," Jack suggested. "Family, hobbies, secret talents?" Let's see," Lindsay mused, tapping her chin playfully. "I grew up here in the city, only child until I was 10, then surprise. Baby brother Brian came along. As for hobbies, I'm a bit of a tennis fanatic. And secret talents?" She leaned in conspiratorially. "I can touch my nose with my tongue." Jack burst out laughing, nearly missing their turn. "Now that's a talent I'd like to see someday," he said, immediately blushing at the unintended flirtation. Lindsay, however, seemed unfazed. "Play your cards right, Mr. Montgomery, and you just might," she teased. As they turned onto Maple Grove, Jack's jaw dropped. The houses here weren't just big, they were palatial. Manicured lawns stretched as far as the eye could see, interrupted only by ornate fountains and circular driveways. "It's just up here on the right," Lindsay directed, pointing to a grand Tudor-style mansion with ivy-covered walls and a gated entrance. Jack pulled up to the intercom, trying to hide his amazement. "This is where you live?" he asked, unable to keep the awe from his voice. Lindsay nodded, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Yeah, it's a bit much, isn't it? My parents won the lottery about 5 years ago. They always joke that they've gone from eating TV dinners to dining with CEOs." As the gates swung open, Jack drove up the winding driveway, feeling increasingly out of place in his designer suit and luxury car. He parked in front of the grand entrance where marble columns framed an intricately carved wooden door. "Would you like to come in for a drink?" Lindsay offered as Jack helped her out of the car. "I make a mean martini." Jack hesitated, glancing at his watch. It was barely past 6, and the thought of spending more time with Lindsay was tempting. "Sure, why not?" he agreed, following her up the steps. The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and priceless artwork adorned the walls. Lindsay led him through a maze of rooms, each more opulent than the last, until they reached a cozy den with a fully stocked bar. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, gesturing to a plush leather sofa. "How do you like your martini?" "Dry with a twist," Jack replied, sinking into the soft cushions. As Lindsay busied herself behind the bar, he took in the room's details. A state-of-the-art entertainment system dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the backyard, complete with a tennis court and Olympic-sized swimming pool. "Here you go," Lindsay said, handing him a chilled glass. "Cheers to new friendships and unexpected detours." They clinked glasses, and Jack took a sip, the crisp gin dancing on his tongue. "This is excellent," he complimented. "You weren't kidding about your mixology skills." "Oh, I never kid about alcohol," Lindsay said with a wink. She perched on the arm of a nearby chair, her long legs crossed elegantly. "So, Jack, what's your story? How does a young hotshot like yourself end up at Pinnacle?" For the next hour, they chatted easily, swapping stories about their college days, career aspirations, and life experiences. Jack found himself captivated by Lindsay's wit and charm, and he couldn't help but feel a growing attraction. As the conversation lulled, Lindsay's eyes lit up with an idea. "Hey, you said you played tennis in college, right?" When Jack nodded, she continued, "How about a quick game? The court's lit and I'm always up for a challenge." Jack glanced down at his suit. "I'd love to, but I'm not exactly dressed for it." Lindsay waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that's no problem. I've got plenty of spare gear. My brother leaves his stuff here all the time." Before Jack could protest, Lindsay was leading him upstairs to a guest room. She rummaged through a closet, pulling out various items of clothing. "Here," she said, tossing him a pair of shorts and a polo shirt. "These should fit you." Jack caught the clothes, but his brow furrowed in confusion. Lindsay? These are women's clothes?" Lindsay turned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Oh, did I forget to mention? My brother Brian is actually my sister Brianna. She's transgender and in the process of transitioning. These are her old clothes from before she started living as her true self." Jack's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I see," he said, processing this new information. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't assume." "No worries," Lindsay assured him. "It's not something we broadcast given Dad's position in the community. But Brianna's happier than ever now, and that's all that matters to us." Jack nodded, a wave of admiration washing over him for Lindsay and her family's acceptance. "That's wonderful. I'm glad she has such a supportive family." Lindsay beamed at him. "Thanks, Jack. That means a lot." She gestured to the clothes in his hands. "Now, are you game for a little cross-dressing tennis? Or are you going to let a girl beat you while you're in a 3-piece suit?" Jack looked down at the floral tennis dress and back at Lindsay's challenging smirk. In that moment, he made a decision that would change the course of his evening and, unknowingly, his life. You know what? Bring it on. 15 minutes later, Jack found himself on the tennis court, tugging self-consciously at the hem of the dress. The cool night air kissed his bare legs, and he felt both ridiculous and strangely exhilarated. "Looking good, Jack," Lindsay called from across the net, twirling her racket. "Or should I say Jackie?" Jack rolled his eyes, but couldn't suppress a grin. "Let's just play, Williams, unless you're afraid of losing to a guy in a dress." They started rallying, the rhythmic thwack of ball against racket filling the air. Despite his unusual attire, Jack found himself getting into the game, his competitive spirit taking over. They were evenly matched, trading points back and forth, their laughter and playful trash talk echoing across the court. As Jack was about to serve for the match point, a voice called out from the darkness. "Hey, Linz, who's your friend?" Jack froze, the ball slipping from his fingers as two figures emerged from the shadows. One was a tall, athletic man who bore a striking resemblance to Lindsay. The other was a shorter, stockier guy with a friendly face. "Brian," Lindsay exclaimed, jogging over to greet her brother with a hug. "I thought you were out with Steve tonight." "Change of plans," Brian said, his eyes fixed on Jack. Who's this vision in floral? Jack felt his face burning as he awkwardly made his way to the group. Lindsay, ever quick on her feet, jumped in. This is Ellen, a friend from work. Ellen, this is my brother Brian and his buddy Steve. Nice to meet you, Jack said in a higher pitch than usual, extending his hand. Brian took it, holding on a moment longer than necessary. The pleasure's all mine, Brian said, his gaze lingering on Jack's face. You know, you look familiar. Have we met before? Jack's heart raced as he shook his head. I don't think so. I'm new in town. Well, we should fix that, Brian said with a charming smile. How about we make this a doubles match? Steve and I against you lovely ladies? Before Jack could protest, Lindsay clapped her hands excitedly. That's a great idea. What do you say, Ellen? Ready to show these boys how it's done? Trapped, and more than a little overwhelmed, Jack nodded mutely. As they took their positions on the court, he shot Lindsay a panicked look. She responded with a reassuring wink, mouthing, "Just go with it." The next hour was a blur of serves, volleys, and near misses as Jack tried to focus on the game while hyper-aware of Brian's admiring glances. Despite the absurdity of the situation, he found himself enjoying the camaraderie and competitive spirit. Lindsay was a formidable partner, and together they managed to eke out a narrow victory against Brian and Steve. As they shook hands at the net, Brian's lingered on Jack's. "Great game, Ellen," he said softly. "You've got quite the forehand." "Thanks," Jack mumbled, acutely aware of how close they were standing. "You guys put up a good fight." "Hey," Steve piped up. "We were thinking of heading to O'Malley's for a few drinks. You ladies want to join us?" Lindsay looked at Jack, a silent question in her eyes. Jack knew he should make his excuses and leave, but something about the excitement of the evening, the thrill of the game, and yes, the flattering attention from Brian made him nod in agreement. "Sounds fun," he said, surprising himself. "Just let me freshen up a bit." As they walked back to the house, Brian fell into step beside Jack. "So, Ellen," he began, his voice low and intimate, "what do you do at Pinnacle?" Jack's mind raced to come up with a plausible story. "I'm in marketing," he said, drawing on his actual experience. "Mostly digital campaigns and brand strategy." Brian's eyes lit up. "No way. I'm in advertising myself. We should compare notes sometime." As they entered the house, Lindsay steered Jack towards the guest room. "Come on, Ellen," she said pointedly. "Let's get you cleaned up." Once the door was closed behind them, Jack collapsed onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. "What have I gotten myself into, Lindsay?" he groaned. Lindsay sat beside him, patting his back sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't expect Brian to show up. But hey, look on the bright side, you're a hit with my brother." Jack looked up, fixing her with an exasperated glare. "And how exactly is that the bright side?" Lindsay shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Well, it's flattering, isn't it? And admit it, you're having fun." Jack was about to argue, but he paused, realizing that despite his discomfort, there was a part of him that was exhilarated by the whole charade. "I must be losing my mind," he muttered. "That's the spirit," Lindsay chirped, standing up. "Now let's get you looking fabulous for your night out." 30 minutes later, Jack found himself perched on a bar stool at O'Malley's, nursing a cosmopolitan and trying to keep his legs crossed ladylike. Lindsay sat beside him while Brian and Steve were at the bar getting another round. "You're doing great," Lindsay whispered, giving his hand a squeeze. "Brian's totally smitten." Jack took a long sip of his drink, wincing at the sweetness. "That's what I'm afraid of," he muttered. "How long do we have to keep this up?" Before Lindsay could answer, Brian returned, sliding onto the stool on Jack's other side. "So, Ellen," he said, his voice low and intimate, "tell me more about yourself. What brings a beautiful woman like you to our little city?" Jack felt a blush creep up his neck, partly from embarrassment and partly from the genuine warmth in Brian's eyes. "Oh, you know," he said, pitching his voice higher, "just looking for new opportunities, a fresh start." Brian nodded empathetically. "I get that. Sometimes you need to shake things up, find out who you really are." He leaned in closer, his breath warm on Jack's ear. "And who you want to be with." Jack's heart raced, a mix of panic and something else he couldn't quite name. He was saved from responding by a commotion at the bar. A burly man with a red face was arguing loudly with the bartender. "I said I want another drink," the man slurred, slamming his fist on the bar. The bartender, a petite woman with a no-nonsense expression, stood her ground. "And I said you're cut off, John. Go home and sleep it off." John's bloodshot eyes scanned the room, landing on Jack, A leering grin spread across his face as he stumbled towards their group. "Well, hello there, pretty lady," he drawled, reaching out to touch Jack's hair. Jack recoiled, but before he could react, Brian was on his feet, inserting himself between Jack and John. "Back off, buddy," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "The lady's not interested." John sneered, swaying on his feet. "Who asked you, pretty boy? Why don't you let the lady speak for herself?" Brian's fists clenched at his sides. "I'm warning you, John. Walk away now." The tension in the air was palpable as the two men faced off. Jack stood up, placing a hand on Brian's arm. "It's okay," he said softly. "Let's just go." John, incensed by being ignored, lunged forward, aiming a wild punch at Brian. In the chaos that ensued, Jack found himself caught in the middle, trying to separate the two men. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain as an errant elbow caught him in the temple. The world spun, voices became muffled, and then everything went black. When Jack regained consciousness, he found himself cradled in strong arms, a concerned face hovering above him. It took a moment for his vision to clear, and when it did, he realized with a jolt that it was Brian holding him, worry etched across his features. "Ellen? Ellen, can you hear me?" Brian's voice was soft, filled with genuine concern. Jack blinked, disoriented. He could see Lindsay standing nearby, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with worry. Steve was there too, keeping other patrons at bay. What happened?" Jack mumbled, his voice cracking. Brian's hold on him tightened slightly. "That drunk idiot John tried to take a swing at me and you got caught in the crossfire. Are you okay? Do you need a hospital?" Jack started to shake his head, then winced at the movement. "No, I think I'm all right. Just a bit dizzy." "Let's get you some air," Brian said, helping Jack to his feet. He kept a steadying arm around Jack's waist as they made their way outside, Lindsay and Steve following close behind. The cool night air helped clear Jack's head, but it also brought with it a stark realization of the situation he was in. Here he was, still dressed as a woman, being tenderly cared for by a man who had no idea of his true identity. The guilt and confusion warred within him. "I'm so sorry this happened, Ellen," Brian said softly, his hand rubbing soothing circles on Jack's back. "I should have handled that better. Can I drive you home?" Jack looked at Lindsay, panic rising in his chest. She stepped in smoothly. "Actually, Ellen's staying with me tonight. We had a girls' night planned." Brian nodded, though he looked a bit disappointed. "Of course. Well, can I at least get your number? I'd like to check on you tomorrow, make sure you're okay." Jack froze, unsure how to respond. Lindsay once again came to his rescue. "Why don't you give me your number, Brian? I'll make sure Ellen gets it when she's feeling better." After exchanging numbers and saying their goodbyes, Lindsay and Jack made their way back to her house in silence. It wasn't until they were safely inside that Jack finally spoke. "Lindsay, what have we done?" he groaned, collapsing onto the sofa and burying his face in his hands. "This has gone way too far." Lindsay sat beside him, her expression a mix of guilt and amusement. I know. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't expect things to escalate like this." Jack looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "We have to tell Brian the truth. He deserves to know." Lindsay bit her lip, considering. "You're right, of course, but maybe not right away. Brian leaves for a year-long assignment in Tokyo next week. What if we just let this fade away?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "You want me to ghost your brother?" "Not ghost exactly," Lindsay said, her mind clearly working overtime. "What if we tell him that Ellen got an unexpected job transfer? It's not ideal, I know, but it might be kinder than the truth." Jack mulled it over. The thought of hurting Brian didn't sit well with him, but the alternative, the humiliation and potential anger that might come with the truth, seemed even worse. "Okay," he said finally. "But after this, no more schemes, no more lies. Deal?" Lindsay nodded solemnly. "Deal. And Jack, I really am sorry. I hope this hasn't ruined our friendship." Jack sighed, then gave her a small smile. "It hasn't. But maybe next time we hang out, we could just grab coffee like normal people?" Lindsay laughed, relief evident in her voice. "Absolutely. Although I have to say, you do rock a tennis dress." The next morning, Lindsay called Brian and spun the tale they had agreed upon. Ellen had received an unexpected job offer in another city and had to leave immediately. She wouldn't be able to call or keep in touch due to the demanding nature of the new position. Brian was clearly disappointed, but he accepted the explanation. "I guess it wasn't meant to be," he said wistfully. "But hey, if Ellen ever comes back to town, let her know she's got a friend here, okay?" Lindsay agreed, feeling a pang of guilt as she hung up the phone. She relayed the conversation to Jack, who had spent an uncomfortable night on her guest room sofa. "Well, that's that," Jack said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I should get going. I've imposed on you enough." As Jack gathered his things and prepared to leave, there was an awkward moment at the door. The events of the past 24 hours hung between them, filled with excitement, deception, and an undeniable connection. "Jack," Lindsay said softly, "I know things got a bit crazy, but I really enjoyed spending time with you. The real you, I mean." Jack paused, his hand on the doorknob. He turned back to look at Lindsay, seeing her in a new light. Beyond the mischievous schemer was a warm, quick-witted woman who had shown him a side of life he'd never experienced before. "I enjoyed it too," he admitted, "even the parts where I was in mortal fear of being discovered." Lindsay laughed, the tension breaking. "So, what do you say? Friends?" Jack smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Friends," he agreed. Then, feeling a surge of courage, he added, "And maybe, once the dust settles and your brother is safely in Tokyo, we could grab dinner sometime?" Lindsay's eyes lit up. "I'd like that, Jack. I'd like that very much." As Jack drove home, his mind replayed the events of the past day. It had been a whirlwind of emotions and experiences, from the thrill of deception to the warmth of connection. He realized that sometimes the most unexpected detours in life could lead to the most rewarding destinations. Over the next few months, Jack and Lindsay's friendship deepened. They kept things platonic while Brian was still in town, not wanting to complicate matters further. They grabbed coffee, played tennis, with Jack in appropriate attire this time, and shared long conversations about life, work, and their hopes for the future. When Brian finally left for his assignment in Tokyo, Jack and Lindsay's relationship naturally evolved. Their first official date was a far cry from the chaotic night at O'Malley's, a quiet dinner at a rooftop restaurant, where they could be themselves without any pretense or disguise. As they clinked glasses under the stars, Lindsay grinned at Jack. "You know, I kind of miss Ellen. She was a great tennis partner." Jack rolled his eyes but couldn't help smiling. "Ellen has retired, but I hear Jack's backhand is improving daily." Lindsay reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "Well then, Mr. Montgomery, how about a rematch? Winner buys dessert." Jack squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "You're on, Miss Williams. But this time, I pick my own outfit." They laughed together, the sound of their joy mixing with the soft music and the distant hum of the city below. As Jack looked into Lindsay's eyes, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected journeys could lead to the most beautiful destinations. And while he didn't know exactly where this path would take them, he was excited to find out, one serve at a time.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.